Well, everyone, the iPhone SE 3rd generation has actually been out for a little bit of time now. Actually, for about a week I've had it. And I want to break down my experience with this device. It's not anything crazy. I'm kind of not really shocked. It's exactly how I thought. There's a couple of areas where I kind of had to adjust my other iPhones, which is very interesting, and I'll let you guys know about that. But pretty much the iPhone SE 3 sits at a very strange spot. And that's the best way I can put it. From my many comparisons that I've already done with this iPhone, I haven't really seen it to be a crazy amount better than the previous generations of devices. That's including the iPhone SE 2, that's including the iPhone 12 mini, that's including the iPhone, even an iPhone 8, for example. Now, with the iPhone 8, I found that the speed difference is the biggest thing you're going to be getting. You're going to be getting a much faster phone on that iPhone SE 3, and I wouldn't necessarily go from an iPhone 8 to an iPhone SE 3, if that's the best way to put it. I would go from an iPhone 8 to an iPhone 11. You can save some money if you want to go in the used market route, but also it's a better experience. One thing that I realized with the iPhone SE 3 is that it's a good phone. It's not a bad phone. It's just a bad phone for the price tag. And that's a completely different thing. The iPhone 13 Pro is a great phone, but if it was a $2,000 device, I think that would be a bad value. The 13 Pro is a tremendous phone. I love that phone. But if it was $3,000, that'd be horrible. It would not be a good value. With the iPhone SE 3, it's the same exact case. I think it's twice the price of what it should be. $299 is the max I would pay for a phone like this. And again, when you have an iPhone like the iPhone SE 3, it is good in the longevity department. It is good in the speed department, but it is not good as an overall phone. And again, that's a big thing to keep in mind. Now, one thing a lot of people actually talk about is the design. They hate the design. They don't like the home button. They don't like Touch ID. Personally, I love the home button and I love Touch ID. I love those things a lot, but I don't like the bezel around it. That's why I prefer the gesture-based design. I love the fingerprint sensor. I think that's way better than Face ID. So that's another big thing to keep in mind as well. I think the build quality is perfectly fine. There's really not too much to hate about it. I mean, it feels just like an iPhone 13 kind of, no flat sides or anything. But you still have glass on the back, you still have the aluminum frame, so it doesn't feel like a cheap phone. But I just don't like the bezel around it. The display isn't even that bad. The display itself, the IPS panel, I'm perfectly fine with that. I don't mind not having an OLED display as of this point. I still like an iPhone 11 panel. I still like an iPhone XR panel. And again, with a cheaper iPhone, you're expecting Apple to cut corners here and there. So that's another kind of decent thing to keep in mind. But one thing that I found when I was looking at my iPhone 8 and I was comparing it to my iPhone SE 3, I noticed that yes, the speed is better, but it is not a better phone overall. And even when you look at something like an iPhone 11 and you compare it against the iPhone SE 3, in fact, even when I just compared my iPhone 10 from 2017 and I compared it to the iPhone SE 3 that just came out in 2022, there are still a lot of ways of why the iPhone 10 is a better phone and why an iPhone 10 is a better phone overall. Yeah, I would probably recommend buying an SE 3 because it's going to last longer, but as of right now, both phones are supported, so that's a big thing to keep in mind. But also, I noticed that the speed isn't something that I think about with an iPhone. I'm already assuming an iPhone is going to be extremely fast, and for things that I use on an everyday basis, I'm not somebody who's sitting there and just playing a bunch of games or, editing my videos on my phone or really anything even close to that. The maximum thing I do is pretty much go on Instagram, I go on TikTok, I go on Twitter, I maybe edit my thumbnails every once in a while on my phone, and then I upload videos maybe very rarely, but I don't really use my phone a crazy amount. But even if I were to use my phone a crazy amount, this iPhone would be able to handle the SE3, but an iPhone 11 can easily handle what I'm going to do, and an iPhone 10 can easily handle what I'm going to do, and I think even an iPhone 7 Plus can probably handle what I'm going to do on an everyday basis. I'm not really using my phone I don't really need a demanding phone to do those things. So I noticed the speed doesn't really mean that much to me, but the gesture-based design is so important to me personally. I like having the device that I can just pick up and I can just use the gesture-based design. It makes the phone that much smoother. And with a phone like the iPhone SE 3, you're still dependent on that home button, which again, I don't really mind. I don't think the home button is bad, but when you have something that has a gesture-based design like an iPhone 11 or iPhone 10, it makes the phone so much smoother. It's like the difference from like a 60 hertz panel and a 120 hertz panel. The phone isn't a faster phone, but it feels so much faster. And that's kind of what you're lacking on an iPhone SE 3. The phone, I'm sure performance is better when you're playing games games and everything like that, but it really doesn't feel like that much faster than my iPhone SE 2nd generation or even my iPhone 8 if I'm not comparing them side by side. When I compare them side by side, massive differences for sure, but I don't really feel like that. If I went from an iPhone SE 3 to an iPhone 10, I will feel like the phone is so much smoother and faster on an iPhone 10 because of that gesture-based design. I don't have to wait for that input delay on that, home button. So even the speed thing on this iPhone isn't really like that much crazier. And even my iPhone 12 mini with an Apple A14 Bionic chip with the same amount of RAM as this one was actually performing better for my speed test than this device. So it's weird about the speed thing. I'm just not really following along or in love with the speed thing about these iPhones anymore because they're all super fast. On top of that, the camera quality on this thing really wasn't as great as I was expecting it to be. I mean, it's still good, but again, how much better can you make a single camera setup? In this day and age, if we don't have at least dual cameras, you're really lacking out and missing out on some cool things that can happen in the future. On top of that, the modes on this camera are exactly the same as they were on the iPhone SE 2nd generation. 4K at 60 on the back, I think still 1080p on the front, which is okay, but there's no cinematic mode. I was expecting cinematic mode to be brought over to this iPhone because it has the A15 and it has almost the same internals as the iPhone 13, so I don't know why cinematic mode couldn't have came on this specific iPhone. So that was very, very strange. Again, I think the camera quality is fine for somebody like me who's not really, making a bunch of photos or videos on their, phones. I have a DSLR camera for that, so I don't really need my phone to be at a crazy level. But I do think some of Apple's claims, like a great camera and way better this and way better that, I just don't think it's really at that level. Even on their website, they state like, oh, it's up to 1.2 times faster graphics performance than an iPhone SE 2 or up to whatever 2.2 times better than the iPhone 8. Yeah, it probably is, but I'm not somebody who really depends on those things. I like having a phone that's, dependable and everything. And with an iPhone SE 3, you're getting, I think, a dependable phone. And that's the thing that Apple didn't really highlight. They didn't really show like, oh, this is a, very stable phone for the price tag. They said this is a very fast phone. They said it now has 5G, it's this and that. But I think this is a great iPhone for the stability standpoint because it's going to be lasting for a very long time. I've noticed that with a lot of my home button iPhones, there's very few issues that I've had. It's very strange. It seems like with my gesture-based iPhones, and this may be just like a conspiracy or something, but there are always there are some issues here and there. I noticed there's some weird things here and there. It's definitely not crazy, a lot of stability issues, but with a lot of my home button iPhones, it's kind of more stable, and the SE lineup has been notorious of having some really good stability. Even though I didn't like my iPhone SE 2 that much, that was a very stable iPhone, believe it or not. Even though my iPhone SE first generation, I probably wouldn't recommend buying anymore, that is one of the best iPhones on iOS 15 right now that I have, and I've made several videos talking about that. So with the iPhone SE 3, it's at a very weird spot. It's not an upgrade really from the iPhone SE 2 that much. It's getting some better internals and everything, but they didn't really fix anything that was wrong with the previous generation. The battery life is still good. I mean, the battery life, is good now. From the battery test that I did, it's a good battery life. Unfortunately, I'm comparing a brand new iPhone against some used iPhones, and I noticed that if I were to factory reset all these iPhones that I've used, and they would be a very similar battery life to what the iPhone SE 3 is. So take it as you will, but personally, I think the iPhone SE 3 is a phone that if you have to buy a brand new iPhone, this is one of the options you have. This is one of the things that you can just go, and it's the cheapest iPhone you can buy in the brand new market. Unfortunately, it is one of those devices where I just probably wouldn't go and buy it. I would recommend buying something like an iPhone 11. It's a overall better phone. I would recommend buying even an iPhone XR for the time being. It is an overall better phone for a much better price tag. You can buy an iPhone XR for much cheaper than this thing in the used market, and I just don't really find the reason I just don't see the market for this phone. If somebody loves the home button and they love Touch ID, then I think this isn't a bad iPhone, but even at that point, I would recommend just buying an iPhone SE 2nd generation, saving a bunch of money there, probably paying half the cost for it, probably even less than that, and then maybe a year from now or 2 years from now, getting an iPhone 13 when it's gone down in value or something like that. Gesture-based iPhones are here to stay probably, unfortunately, and the Touch ID is not coming back, which is very sad, it seems like, but ultimately, those are my thoughts about the iPhone SE 3 about 1 week later. I know this was a lot, but I had a lot of things on my chest, and after all these comparisons I've done, I kind of have to, compile all my thoughts somewhere. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.